Dr. Ashley Ash Montgomery's boots echoed through the crystalline halls of the Galactic Institute of Ancient Studies, each step a thunderclap in the near-sacred silence. The sound made several Xethi scholars retract their sensory stalks in alarm. Their atmospheric homeworld had never prepared them for such decisive footfalls. Specimen analysis in progress. Please maintain designated noise levels, chimed an AI in 17 different languages. Ash ignored it, just as she ignored the disapproving glances from various species gathered around floating holographic workstations. Her leather satchel, actual animal hide, a rarity in an age of synthetic materials, swung against her hip as she strode toward the central chamber. Inside, carefully wrapped in cloth rather than stasis fields, were the tools she trusted: magnifying glasses, brushes, and other primitive instruments that had served archaeologists since humanity's first fumbling steps toward understanding their past. The paradox sphere dominated the chamber ahead, floating in a containment field of pure energy. 3 meters in diameter, its iridescent surface shifted between colors that human eyes could barely process. Around it, representatives from dozens of species worked at their stations, each approaching the problem with their species' particular brand of genius. Absolutely not. High Scholar Valixith's crystalline form vibrated with indignation as Ash approached the security checkpoint. The human's presence was requested as a diplomatic courtesy, nothing more. She cannot be allowed near the artifact without proper certification in quantum harmonic analysis and temporal resonance theory. Ash pulled out her credentials. Actual paper, another shock to the assembled scholars. Earth University, Department of Xenorchaeology, plus field experience on 37 worlds, including the Zextal ruins on Proxima b. Unqualified. Qualified. A Meridian researcher waved their probability appendages in what Ash recognized as their species' expression of disbelief. We have scholars here who have studied temporal mechanics for centuries. The paradox sphere requires. The sphere, Ash interrupted, has sat in this chamber for 300 years while you've all stared at readouts and energy signatures. How's that working out? The silence that followed was profound enough that even the AI seemed hesitant to break it. Ash used the moment to step closer to the containment field, her eyes already picking up details that the other's instruments had missed. This is unprecedented, Valixith continued. The protocols were written by species that evolved on worlds without predators, without natural disasters, without the need to understand threat patterns at a glance. Ash turned to face the assembled scholars, her voice carrying the weight of Earth's long history of survival. You've been treating this artifact like it's a puzzle to be solved through pure logic. But what if it's something else? What if it's a message from people who were running out of time? The Meridian's probability appendages went still, the equivalent of a human's jaw dropping. Running out of time. The precursors were the height of civilization. Their technology makes them gods in your eyes. Ash finished. But here's something I learned digging through humanity's own ruins. Gods don't leave warnings. She reached into her satchel, pulling out a simple magnifying glass. The assembled aliens watched in a mixture of horror and fascination as she held it up to the containment field, studying the sphere's surface with nothing more than enhanced human eyesight and a brain evolved to spot patterns that meant the difference between life and death. Your sensors scan for energy signatures, quantum fluctuations, temporal distortions, she said softly, her eyes never leaving the sphere. But they don't look for wear patterns. They don't look for tool marks. They don't look for signs of hurry, of desperation, of fear. A smile crossed her face, the smile of a predator species recognizing familiar signs. And that's exactly what I'm seeing. Step away from the containment field immediately. Valixith's crystalline form pulsed with alarming colors. Your primitive instruments could destabilize the quantum matrix. Ash didn't move. Her magnifying glass traced the sphere's surface, while her other hand sketched rapid notes on actual paper, an act that made several of the younger researchers emit distress pheromones. In the 3 minutes since she'd begun her examination, She'd already cataloged more surface details than the automated systems had in the past decade. Interesting, she muttered, more to herself than the increasingly agitated audience. These aren't random abrasions. They're deliberate. Sequential. A Volith researcher, their tentacles wrapped nervously around their datapad, floated closer. Impossible. Our quantum temporal scans show no signs off. Because you're looking for what you expect to find. Ash finally lowered her magnifying glass, but her eyes never left the sphere. You're scanning for sophisticated encryption, complex technological locks, but sometimes, she reached into her satchel again, causing several security drones to power up their containment fields. The simplest solution is the right one. She pulled out a piece of chalk. The collective gasp from the assembled scholars would have been comical if the situation weren't so tense. Valixith's crystalline structure actually cracked slightly in distress. Security breach in progress, the AI announced calmly. Implementing containment protocols in 3. Override Protocol 7 Alpha 9. Ash called out, her voice cutting through the chaos. Earth University Emergency Authentication. The AI paused. Override. Accepted. Warning. This authorization will be reported to the Galactic Council. Add it to my file, Ash muttered, already stepping closer to the sphere. She began sketching on the floor, recreating the patterns she'd observed. What emerged wasn't the complex mathematical formulas the aliens expected, but something far older, something that would have been instantly recognizable to any human archaeologist who'd ever studied ancient warning signs. By the first light, the Volith researcher whispered, their tentacles going slack with shock. Those patterns, they matched the wear marks exactly. Because someone made those marks deliberately. Ash continued sketching, her chalk creating concentric circles that mimicked the sphere's surface patterns. They weren't trying to hide information. They were trying to make it obvious to the right kind of eyes. Valixith vibrated with barely contained fury. This is absurd. You're suggesting the precursors, masters of 11-dimensional engineering, would resort to scratching messages like primitive cave drawings. When you're running out of time. Ash stood, dusting chalk from her hands. You use what works. Humanity learned that lesson over and over. From cave paintings warning of predator territories, to radiation symbols that had to be understood thousands of years later, some messages need to survive beyond technology. She gestured to her chalk drawings. Look at the spacing, the depth of the marks. These weren't made by machinery or tools. These were made by hands, desperate hands, pressing hard enough to leave marks in a material your sensors say is harder than diamond. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The Meridian researchers' probability appendages began calculating frantically. But that would mean, the Volith's voice trembled, the precursors were trying to warn us about something. Ash nodded, her expression grim. Not just warn. They were leaving instructions, emergency instructions. She pointed to a particular series of marks her chalk had replicated. And if I'm right about what these symbols mean in relation to each other. She reached for the sphere. Stop her. Valixith's command shattered the silence. But it came too late. Ash's fingers brushed the surface of the containment field and passed through it as if it wasn't there. The sphere's iridescent surface rippled at her touch, and for the first time in 3 centuries, it began to move. The sphere hummed a note that made the alien scholars retreat, their various sensory organs overwhelmed. But to Ash, it resonated with something deeper than conscious thought. A frequency that spoke to the part of her brain that had once alerted primitive humans to approaching predators. Kill the containment field, she ordered, her hand still pressed against the sphere's surface. It's not protecting the artifact. It's interfering with its activation sequence. Madness. Valixith's crystalline form vibrated so intensely that small fractures appeared in their outer layer. 3 centuries of careful study have gotten us nowhere, Ash finished. Her eyes tracked patterns across the sphere's surface with the same instinctive focus her ancestors had used to read animal tracks. Your species evolved in environments where threats were rare or non-existent. Mine evolved playing an endless game of predator and prey. We learned to recognize patterns not through logic, but through survival. The Volith researcher, braver or more curious than their peers, extended a tentacle toward their control panel. The human's neural patterns are unusual. She's processing visual information through her limbic system rather than her cognitive centers. Because this isn't a puzzle to be solved, Ash's voice had taken on a distant quality, her hunter's instinct fully engaged. It's a trail to be followed. The precursors left signs the way prey leaves tracks, not meant to be seen by everyone, but crystal clear to those who know how to look. The sphere's hum changed pitch, matching her heartbeat. Fascinating. The meridian's probability appendages waved in complex patterns. The artifact appears to be responding to her autonomic nervous system. Perhaps. Shut down the containment field. Ash repeated, more urgently this time. Now. Something in her tone, perhaps the same instinct that had once told human tribes when to run from approaching storms, made the Volith researcher act. Their tentacles danced across the controls, and the shimmering field of energy surrounding the sphere winked out. The effect was immediate. The sphere's surface shifted from iridescent swirls to clearly defined patterns that spiraled out from Ash's touch. To the aliens, it looked like chaos, random scratches and marks appearing and disappearing. But to Ash's predator-honed brain, it was like reading a story written in footprints and broken branches. They were running, she whispered, her free hand sketching rapidly in her notebook. But not randomly. They were following a path they'd used before, leaving markers for others to follow, the way human tribes once marked safe routes through dangerous territories. Valixith floated closer, their scientific curiosity finally overcoming their rigid adherence to protocol. You can derive meaning from these random fluctuations. Random. Ash almost laughed. Look at the repetition in the mark patterns. 3 scratches, then 2, then a spiral. That's not decoration. That's a warning sequence, like the rattling of a snake's tail or the distinctive marks of a poisonous spider. Nature's warning signs are universal, even across galaxies. The sphere's surface temperature began to rise under her palm, but Ash didn't flinch. Her ancestors' survival had often depended on staying still despite discomfort, on reading signs others would miss. The marks get deeper here, she noted, fingers tracing a particularly worn section. They were pressing harder, moving faster. Whatever they were running from. She paused, her hunter's instinct screaming a warning her conscious mind couldn't yet understand. It was getting closer. Suddenly, the sphere's surface shifted beneath her touch, sections rotating and realigning like the world's most complex combination lock. To the watching aliens, it seemed to be responding randomly to her movements. But Ash recognized the pattern. It was the same intuitive sequence any human child would use to open a child-proof medicine bottle. The precursors, it seemed, had designed their lock to be opened by someone who understood the urgency of safety protocols, by someone whose species had evolved alongside danger. With a final click that echoed through the chamber, the sphere began to open. The sphere split along invisible seams, its segments peeling back like the petals of a mechanical flower. The assembled scholars scrambled to activate their scanning devices, but Ash held up a warning hand. "Don't," she said, her voice carrying the weight of countless generations who'd learned when to freeze in the presence of danger. "Look at the opening sequence. It's deliberate, controlled, like a venomous snake showing its fangs. It's not just opening, it's demonstrating something." The meridian's probability appendages twitched frantically. The energy readings are off our established scales. This could be exactly what it's supposed to do. Ash interrupted, her eyes tracking each movement of the sphere's components. Notice how each segment locks into place before the next one moves. That's not mechanical efficiency. That's a safety protocol. Like ancient human airlock systems, you don't open the next door until you're sure the first one is sealed. Valixith's crystalline form had taken on a deeper hue of concern. You cannot possibly derive such specific meaning from simple mechanical movements. Can't I? Ash pulled out her notebook, quickly sketching the sequence. Look at the pattern. 3 segments move, pause, lock. 2 segments move, pause, lock. It's the same warning sequence we saw on the surface, but now it's in motion. This isn't just a locking mechanism. It's an instruction manual. The Volith researcher extended several tentacles in fascination. Like your species' emergency procedures. Exactly. When humans design emergency systems, we make them intuitive. In a crisis, you don't have time to read a manual or solve complex puzzles. You need instructions you can follow by instinct. She gestured at the still-moving sphere. The precursors understood this. They weren't building this for scholars to study. They were building it for survivors to find. As if responding to her words, the final segments of the sphere locked into place with a series of clicks that sent shivers through every alien nervous system in the room. The center of the device now gaped open, revealing an interior that seemed to swallow light itself. Remarkable. The Meridian researcher floated closer, their probability appendages swaying in complex calculations. The interior appears to be lined with a material fat. Stop. Ash's command cracked like a whip, freezing the alien in place. Look at the edge patterns around the opening. Those aren't decorative grooves. They're warning markers, like the ridged patterns around the lid of a biohazard container. She approached the opening carefully, her movements measured and deliberate. The precursors didn't just want to keep something out, she murmured, studying the interior. They wanted to keep something in. These aren't just lock mechanisms, they're containment protocols. Valixith's voice emerged strained through their crystalline form. Are you suggesting the paradox sphere is some kind of prison? No. Ash's fingers traced the air just above the warning markers, reading them like braille. Not a prison. A vault. Like the seed vaults humans built to preserve life through disasters. But what they were preserving. Her voice trailed off as her eyes finally adjusted to the darkness within the sphere. Floating in the center of the void was a lattice of light so complex it hurt to look at directly. To the aliens, it appeared chaotic, meaningless. But to Ash's brain, evolved to track movement through dense forests and across shifting landscapes. Patterns emerged from the chaos. It's a map, she breathed, her hunter's instinct screaming recognition. But not just of space, of movement, like tracking patterns we use to predict animal migration routes. The precursors weren't just recording where they went. Her eyes widened as the final piece clicked into place. They were recording how they ran. The lattice of light pulsed once, as if acknowledging her understanding, and began to expand outward from the sphere. The gathered scholars scrambled back, but Ash stood her ground. Her expression set in the same grim determination her ancestors had worn when facing unknown dangers. Get me a secure channel to Earth Command, she ordered, never taking her eyes off the expanding map. They need to see this. Now, the lattice of light filled the chamber, transforming the sterile research space into a 3-dimensional maze of glowing pathways. While the alien scholars frantically attempted to analyze the display with their instruments, Ash stood motionless in its center, her eyes darting along the paths with predatory focus. Impossible to interpret, Valixith declared, their crystalline form refracting the light in dizzying patterns. The paths overlap in 11 dimensions. Even our most advanced AI systems cannot. Quiet, Ash commanded, not out of rudeness, but with the urgent intensity of a hunter who'd spotted crucial tracks. Watch the flow patterns. They're not random. They're reactive. The Volith researcher extended a tentacle through one of the light paths. Reactive. The display appears static to all our sensors, because you're looking for data, not movement. Ash began to walk through the lattice, her movements deliberate, almost stalking. These paths, they're like game trails. When prey animals run from predators, they don't move randomly. They follow established escape routes, but they adapt them based on the predator's approach. She pointed to where several light paths converged and then split apart. See this pattern? It's the same defensive movement strategy prey species on Earth use. When threatened, a herd splits into smaller groups, making it harder for the predator to track any single target. The Meridian's probability appendages went still with sudden comprehension. The precursors were using prey tactics on a galactic scale. Not just prey tactics, Ash corrected, her hand tracing a complex intersection of paths. Look at how these routes double back, create false trails. These are predator-prey dynamics playing out across star systems. The precursors weren't just running. Her voice hardened. They were being hunted. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The light paths continued their silent dance, and now that Ash had pointed it out, even the aliens could see the desperate strategy in their movements. Here, she pointed to a dense cluster of pathways. This is where it began. The initial scatter pattern, like startled deer bolting in all directions. But then, her finger traced the evolving routes. They got organized, started moving with purpose, like a herd that's learned the predator's hunting patterns. Valixith floated closer, their scientific skepticism warring with the evidence before them. But what could hunt the precursors? Their technological advancement was unmatched in known space. Technology doesn't guarantee survival, Ash murmured, her eyes never leaving the light paths. Earth's history is full of advanced civilizations that fell to supposedly primitive threats. Sometimes, raw hunger is more powerful than sophistication. She moved to where the paths began to thin out, becoming more erratic. This is where they started losing numbers. See how the escape routes become more desperate, less coordinated. Her hand clenched unconsciously. Whatever was hunting them was learning, adapting to their strategies. The Volith researchers' tentacles writhed in distress. The paths, they eventually stop. Not stop, Ash corrected grimly. Converge, like prey animals making a final stand when they realize they can't outrun the predator. She pointed to where all the remaining paths flowed together into a single brilliant stream of light. They weren't running anymore. They were gathering. She stepped back, taking in the full scope of the light lattice, and suddenly her eyes widened with recognition. The pattern. It's not just showing us their escape routes. It's showing us the predator's hunting grounds. The areas it prefers, the ways it moves between systems. The color drained from her face as she recognized a hunting pattern that every human instinctively understood. The methodical, patient stalking of an apex predator. Get me that secure channel to Earth now, she ordered, her voice tight with urgency. Because this map isn't just showing us where the precursors went. It's showing us where the hunter will come next. And based on these movement patterns, she swallowed hard. Earth is right in its path. The secure channel to Earth command crackled to life, projecting Admiral Chen's hologram into the center of the light lattice. The stern-faced military leader took one look at the swirling patterns and Ash's expression, and her usual diplomatic smile vanished. Talk to me, Dr. Montgomery. We've got a Class 1 extinction-level threat incoming, Ash reported, her voice clipped with the efficiency of someone used to delivering bad news. The precursors left us a hunting map. Something chased them across the galaxy, and Earth is in its projected path. The alien scholars watched in fascination as neither human showed signs of panic. Instead, both women's expressions shifted to what their species had evolved over millennia of facing threats. Focused determination. Timeline, the Admiral asked. Based on the predator's movement patterns. Ash studied the light paths intently. Weeks, maybe months. It's methodical, Admiral. Like a leopard working its territory. It doesn't rush. It hunts systematically, clearing one region before moving to the next. Valixith's crystalline form pulsed with anxiety. This is madness. We must alert the Galactic Council, begin evacuation protocols. No, both humans said simultaneously, causing the aliens to recoil in shock. Running is exactly what the precursors tried. Ash explained, her fingers tracing the desperate escape routes in the light lattice. Look where it got them. This thing, it's patient. It follows. Evacuation would just spread us out, make us easier targets. Admiral Chen nodded. Like the buffalo hunts of the old American West, the hunters would scatter the herd, pick them off one by one. Precisely. Ash turned to the assembled scholars. The precursors had better technology than us, faster ships, more advanced weapons, but they thought like prey, always running, always reacting. That's why they lost. And you propose we do differently. The Meridian's probability appendages twisted in disbelief, against a force that hunted down the most advanced civilization in known space. A smile crossed Ash's face, not one of joy, but the fierce grin of a predator species preparing for battle. Humanity has something the precursors didn't. We know what it's like to be both predator and prey. We understand hunting patterns from both sides. She gestured to the light lattice. Look at how it moves between systems. It's not random. It's establishing territory, creating hunting grounds. Just like Earth's apex predators, and like any predator, her eyes gleamed with sudden inspiration. It has patterns, habits, vulnerabilities. Admiral Chen's hologram leaned forward. Are you suggesting we hunt the hunter, Doctor? Better. Ash began highlighting specific points in the light map. I'm suggesting we use its own hunting instincts against it. The precursors thought their technology would save them, but they never understood predator psychology. We do. Every human child knows what happens when you corner a predator in its own territory. The Volith researcher's tentacles curled in confusion. What does happen? It becomes predictable, Admiral Chen answered, her expression matching Ash's predatory smile. It falls back on instinct, basic attack patterns, primitive but effective responses that worked for millions of years. Exactly. Ash's hands danced through the light lattice, marking points and patterns. We can't outrun it, can't outgun it. But we can outsmart it, use its hunting grounds as killing grounds, turn its territory into a trap. Valixith vibrated with a mixture of horror and fascination. You're talking about fighting an entity that destroyed the precursors. No, Ash corrected, her voice carrying the weight of humanity's long history of survival against impossible odds. I'm talking about hunting it. And humanity. We've been perfecting the art of hunting dangerous prey since we first picked up spears and learned to walk upright. She turned back to Admiral Chen's hologram. Her mission to begin Operation Reverse Hunt, ma'am. The Admiral's response was immediate and grim. Granted. Welcome to the hunt, Dr. Montgomery. This time, we're the ones setting the trap. Within hours, the sterile research chamber had transformed into a makeshift war room. Holographic tactical displays merged with the precursor's light lattice, creating a three-dimensional battlefield that spanned sectors of space. Ash stood at its center, surrounded by both Earth military strategists and increasingly fascinated alien scholars. The key is understanding predator psychology, she explained, manipulating the display. Every successful hunter has a preferred killing ground, a territory they know intimately, where they feel in control. Her fingers traced the path of destruction through the galaxy. This thing is no different. Admiral Chen's hologram nodded. Like a tiger's hunting territory. Exactly. But that's where we have an advantage. Ash highlighted specific regions in the map. The precursors kept running into unknown space. We're going to do the opposite. We're going to make it chase us exactly where we want it to go. Valixith's crystalline form shimmered with confusion, into its own hunting grounds. That seems counterintuitive. That's because you're thinking like prey, one of Earth's military strategists, Colonel Santos interjected. But we've studied every apex predator on Earth. They all share one crucial weakness. They're creatures of habit. Ash nodded, pulling up historical Earth data alongside the star maps. Look at how ancient humans hunted lions, not by chasing them across the savannah, but by understanding their habits, where they drink, where they rest, where they prefer to make their kills. We turn their own patterns into traps. The Meridian researchers' probability appendages worked furiously, but this entity operates on a galactic scale. Scale doesn't change basic hunting behavior, Ash countered. She pointed to a dense cluster of destroyed systems. See these attack patterns. It's not random destruction. It's methodical. It herds its prey into zones where they can't escape, just like a wolf pack driving caribou into a ravine. Colonel Santos stepped forward, his expression grim. So we give it what it expects. Let it think it's hurting us. But we control where we're being herded. Ash finished. She manipulated the display, highlighting a specific region of space. This sector. The precursor data shows it's one of its favorite hunting grounds. The gravity waves here create natural corridors, like game trails in space. The Volith researchers' tentacles curled with sudden understanding. You're going to turn its hunting grounds into a killing field. Better. Ash's smile was fierce. We're going to use every trick humanity learned as both predator and prey. The false trails we use to escape wolves. The pit traps we use to catch tigers. The decoy tactics we use to protect our herds. She began marking points in the tactical display, each one corresponding to a strategic position. Here, here, and here. We place our fastest ships as bait, like wounded animals separated from the herd, but behind them. The rest of the fleet. Admiral Chen finished. Hidden in the gravity wells like hunters in blinds. And when it commits to the chase, Colonel Santos added, it won't expect its prey to turn and fight. No prey species ever does. That's our advantage. Valixith vibrated with a mixture of terror and awe. You're betting the survival of your species on the assumption that a galactic-level threat will behave like an Earth predator. No. Ash corrected, her voice hard with certainty. We're betting on 4 million years of human evolution that taught us how to turn the tables on things that wanted to eat us. We're betting on the knowledge written in our DNA by countless ancestors who learned to think like predators so they could survive them. She looked around the room, meeting the eyes of both humans and aliens. The precursors died because they only knew how to run. Humanity. We learned long ago that sometimes survival means becoming the more dangerous predator. Admiral Chen's hologram straightened. Operation Reverse Hunt is a go. All ships to battle stations. Let's remind the galaxy why Earth is classified as a death world. As the room erupted into activity, Ash turned back to the star map, her expression set in the same determined focus her ancestors had worn when turning from prey to hunter. The trap was set. Now it was time to see who was truly the apex predator of the galaxy. 3 months later, Ash stood before the Galactic Council, her leather satchel replaced by a ceremonial Earth Command uniform. The chamber was packed with representatives from every spacefaring species, all eager to hear how humanity had accomplished the impossible. The entity has been contained, she began, her voice carrying the quiet confidence of a predator after a successful hunt. Operation Reverse Hunt concluded exactly as predicted, not because of superior technology or overwhelming force, but because we understood something fundamental about predator psychology. She activated a holographic display, showing the final battle. The alien representatives leaned forward, watching in fascination as Earth's ships executed their trap with lethal precision. It came at us exactly as we anticipated. Ash continued, highlighting the entity's movement patterns. Like all apex predators, it was too used to being the hunter, too confident in its tactics. When it saw our wounded ships, it didn't question why prey would suddenly act so vulnerable. Velixith, now sporting new crystalline growths from their close observation of the battle, chimed in. The entity's attack pattern matched your prehistoric predator models with 99.8% accuracy. Of course it did, Ash smiled. Because no matter how advanced a hunter becomes, the basic instincts remain the same. The urge to chase fleeing prey, the commitment to an attack once started, the blind spot for threats that don't fit the prey pattern. The hologram showed the critical moment. The entity, a shifting mass of dark energy, and ancient hunger, pursuing Earth's decoy ships into the prepared killing ground. Then the trap sprung. Hidden fleets emerging from gravity wells, experimental weapons firing from calculated angles, and the hunter suddenly finding itself hunted. What happened next wasn't just a victory for Earth, Ash explained, her voice solemn. It was a victory for every species that ever evolved from prey into predator. We didn't just fight it, we hunted it, used its own psychology against it, turned its hunting ground into our killing field. The Meridian's probability appendages waved in amazement. The entity was trapped in the same gravity corridors it had used to corner the precursors. Poetic justice, Colonel Santos commented from his position beside Ash. It died the same way it had killed so many others. Except this time, it faced prey that knew how to bite back. Admiral Chen's hologram appeared next to the battle display. The creature is now contained in a modified version of the precursor sphere, using the same technology they tried to use to warn us. Dr. Montgomery's understanding of their emergency protocols was crucial in adapting it for offensive use. Ash stepped forward, her expression serious. But the real victory isn't the trap we sprung or the technology we salvage. It's the lesson we learned and taught the galaxy. Running isn't always the answer. Sometimes survival means standing your ground, understanding your enemy, and being willing to fight on their terms. The Volith researcher, their tentacles now decorated with Earth military honors, addressed the Council. The humans have proposed establishing a new division, the Galactic Predator Response Unit, a combination of military strategy and synorchaeological expertise dedicated to protecting our civilization from similar threats. Because this entity wasn't the only hunter out there, Ash added grimly. The precursor's data suggests others exist. Different hunting patterns, different territories, but the same basic predatory nature. And now we know how to fight them. The council chamber erupted in unanimous approval. As the various species discussed the implications, Ash quietly stepped away from the podium. She reached into her uniform pocket, touching the worn leather of her old satchel strap, a reminder of where this all began. Quite a journey from breaking protocols in the research chamber, Valaksyth observed, floating beside her. Ash smiled, watching the diverse species of the galaxy coming together with new purpose. That's humanity's gift to the universe, she said softly. We remember what it means to be prey, but we never forget what it means to become the hunter. Sometimes, survival means being both. In the heart of the Galactic Council chamber, the future of interstellar defense was being shaped, not by overwhelming technology or ancient wisdom, but by the simple primal lessons learned on a death world called Earth.